This is the Rebel HR Podcast, the podcast about all things innovation in the people space. I'm Kyle Rode. Let's start the show. Welcome back, Rebel HR community. We're going to have a fun conversation, a little bit of a different conversation today. We've got 4 people on this conversation, so we're going to do a little round robin today on Rebel HR. With us, we have Samantha Coulson and Millie Fiebelkorn. They are the co-directors of the Iowa State SHRM Conference. It's being held this year in Coralville, Iowa, September 25th to 27th. Side note, if you hop on the link in show notes, you can sign up for early bird pricing as long as you do that before August 20th. So open up that podcast player if you want to grab that cheaper price. But we're going to be talking a little bit more broadly today about not just the conference, but about HR in general and where HR has come from and is going. And so we're gonna have a good conversation today. Before we jump into that, I'd like to ask Samantha and Millie. First of all, thank you for joining. I'm curious, what motivated you to raise your hand and do the sometimes unenvious task of running the State SHRM Conference?
Well, thank you guys so much for having us. We are big fans of Rebel HR, so it's exciting to be back. And so this is my 3rd year serving on the conference committee and my 2nd in that co-director position. And I just found like it's a great way to give back to our HR professionals in Iowa and really facilitate that networking, that in-person connection that we often miss in our businesses because we are in smaller teams. And so I always think it's fun to kind of get the whole group together and learn some stuff while we do some really fun networking as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Kyle, for having us. I got into this after doing 3 years as well of the SHRM Conference, but I took a gap year last year, had a little bit of time off as I went through some craziness at work, but focused mostly on programming and apps, social media posts prior to that. Strange story, I volunteered for that same spot this year and got approached to jump into this co-director role. It kind of blindsided me when I was asked to do. Didn't take me long to decide I wanted to, though. I wanted to jump up and volunteer a little bit more, get back into the volunteering and try to make a name for myself as well as really grow my profile.
You know what, Millie? That is a very similar story to how I got the honor of being the president of my local SHRM chapter. And with us, we've got Patrick Moran, our long estranged podcast co-founder, who's finally found some time to join us back again. And literally, I signed up for I think it was workforce development. I wanted to be on the board as workforce development. They're like, here, you should be president. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And just
voluntold in
yeah.
professional development.
And you know what? I hear that story here and there from other there's SHRMers that are like, oh yeah, I got sucked into this volunteer leadership role. So thank you both for volunteering your time. And I think a lot of credit and recognition goes to these volunteers within our organization to help further HR, because it's relatively thankless. It takes a lot of time, and it's time away from our day jobs, and we're all in HR here, and that there's not always a lot of time in the day to take away from our day jobs. So I appreciate you investing some time to help us all out. The conference this year is interesting. So it fits well within the Rebel HR theme because you're changing some things around. The conference title is What's Brewing in HR? So I want to start by asking a question. What prompted that theme to be the choice for this year's conference?
Well, Patrick, you may be the best one to answer this. Were you on the state council when this was approved?
Yeah, so it's interesting when we're sitting it's usually in December, we're at the state council meeting. We're always creating the themes for 2 years out. So we did this 2 years ago in 2021, established this, or 2022 established the 2024 theme. And I think it was one that wasn't hard to do. We didn't want to do the same old thing. And somebody just said, what's brewing? And then we were just like, oh, that makes sense. And it was, usually we're fighting over themes, combining two themes. I think that's what we did last year with the Great Reset, but I'm pretty sure this one came together pretty easy.
Yeah, it's kind of those voluntold things, but then, like you said, they choose it 2 years out. I helped select, I guess it would be the one for 2026. And you're really kind of getting in that conversation. First, you just start spitballing with Post-its. But then by the time we make it to that year when it is, it's really our job to work with our committee to get that heartbeat of what's actually going in HR right at this time. And so, no one can really look out in 2 years into the future. So once we get there, we get the theme going. It's ours to personalize, and it's great because what's brewing, we can talk just about what's happening right at the time.
Yeah,
It's funny though.
We get the title. That's what we get. So like Sam said, having the heartbeat of it, figuring out what our story is going to look like as we grow this and develop it. We have no clue what the end result's going to look like.
Yeah, it's funny. I want to say the original theme started out as like a brewery and beer because of being in Coralville, and that
makes sense. That makes sense.
I think that's kind of where the thought originally was and what you guys turned it into. And kind of along with the tracks you have going sound really interesting. If you could talk a little bit to like the theme of the tracks.
Yeah, so along the way, we were going back and forth in the beginning of, is it more coffee, tea brewing? Is it more beer brewing? What type of brewing do we want to go with? And obviously, HR, you don't want to offend anyone necessarily. So we tried to go with a topic that was pretty safe, keeping it with coffee and tea. And then in the evening, people can do whatever the heck they want to do with the brewing theme. And so I'm coffee obsessed myself. I love my coffee. We'll drink it 24/7 if I could. And so I think our program chairs really came up with some good threads and good themes for those tracks, along with sticking with that coffee theme.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I'm with you on the coffee thing. And, Patrick, before we hit record, basically told me I looked like crap because he said, wow, you look really tired. But, I would drink it all the time. And I made the mistake last night of drinking it at like 10:30 p.m. And so, I just, you lay there thinking about solving every world problem until 4 a.m. So anyways, side at a time. So, one of the things that I think is really interesting, we were talking about this as we were getting prepared is one of the key themes of the conference is around, it's around brewing, but it's really around connections and conversation, and if there's anything that, whether it's whatever your beverage of choice is, whether it's coffee, beer, tea, or whatever have you, kombucha for the, the like hippies in the crowd, we got you. But it's about connecting with others. And I think one of the things, and spent a lot of research around this recently around the loneliness epidemic, burnout in HR, that one of the antidotes to that is fostering these types of connections. And so one of the approaches of the conference this year has been a little bit different than let's just go get a bunch of PDCs so that we can check the box. It's been about being pretty intentional about making sure that people have an opportunity to connect with other HR professionals. So walk me through how you approached kind of that problem statement in the conference this year, and what people can expect that's a little bit different than maybe they haven't seen in years past.
Yeah, I think that the loneliness epidemic is something that's really interesting to read on. For you listeners out there that haven't done much research, I think it's really critical, especially when you look at whether you have remote employees or you have employees that maybe are in rural areas or employees in departments of one, to really understand that in the impact it's going to create on people, and really how that ties into benefits and performance and everything. But that's a huge part of, in my opinion, why I even have conference, because now with the technology, we really could do everything over webinar, but we want to get people there and together. And that's where I feel like you build your closest relationships. And so to me, when we talked about well, what can we do to make this conference better? And what can we do to make people want to come back? And that's really the people. So some of our keynotes this year, we have focused on what we're calling edutainment, because you're going to get some really solid PDCs and technical learning in our breakout sessions. But I also want you to walk away feeling moved and motivated. So we have some really cool speakers this year. Kara is our keynote, our opening keynote, and she has a really cool story on how she had some major changes in her life and took that and kind of from the ground up was able to build her own house. And I don't want to give away all of her stories that she's going to give us, but really, as we look into the loneliness epidemic, if someone is going through anything, we also, of course, have the huge mental health epidemic. How do you take that and build something from it? And then our ending speaker, his name is Austin. He is the only living person to survive 2 plane crashes. So I think that's a really interesting outlook that he has on life and things, and how do you capitalize on when bad things do happen. And whether that is a candidate ghosting you for an interview or having to put together a severance package for a long-term employee, we see that at all different levels of things here in HR. So how can you take those little fires we're putting out every day and go to make it be a good day for yourself and a good day for your business?
And a side note with that, for any of you basketball fans out there, Austin Hatch was very determined to go to the school of his dreams to play basketball. So you want to meet someone who's in that and talk through the process. He's a great opportunity to do that.
Those sound like some really cool stories. I'm looking forward to hearing them. What, outside of those, what are some of the things? And I think we touch on this a little bit, the PDCs, why people tend to go to these conferences, that conversation shifting to more networking, stop checking the box. But what's starting to make the conference over these last couple of years, this year in particular, different from last year, like enticing all of our HR professionals to come? What are some of the few nuggets of evolution and change that we can expect this year?
I think a lot of the sessions that we're looking at, sure, they're PDC check the box sessions, but a lot of the speakers are trying to target more of what can you take with you. That's what we're aiming for, even with our pre-conference speaker, is what's something tangible you can actually bring back and share with those around you. We've been taking a lot of feedback from the prior years into consideration as well as we grow this conference. I know one of the concerns was having easy access to, say, your coffees and your drinks of choice, things like that. And we're trying to look into bringing coffee closer to the users so you don't have to walk clear across the hotel just to get it. So we're trying to bring some of those in that are different. Our Thursday night activities that we have at our exhibitor session, we're trying to tailor those around building that connection with your vendors, all of our sponsors as well, and keeping it a little bit more low key so that you have that chance to build your connections, your friendships, share the word of who you are with them.
I think another big part of that is having fun at the conference. I feel like, I go to both Iowa SHRM and National SHRM, and I can take away things to go and implement in my office, but what I really am taking away is those connections. So we want to really foster those. I know actually everybody on this call, I at one point met at a SHRM conference. And so it's such a small world to be able to do that. So we do want to throw in some fun things. This year, I'm super excited. We're going to have dueling pianos at that Thursday night reception. And I haven't really met many HR professionals that don't love dueling pianos and adult beverages that they like. And so that's kind of just something to get the conversation going and break the ice with the different piano players that'll be playing. And so we want people to come and have fun, but we're still going to end it early. That way they can continue their networking, whether that be at dinner or, different groups will sometimes break off to their regions, depending on what other events are going on that night. But really to be able to meet people and build those connections and have great memories. That way they want to keep coming back year after year.
And with that networking that happens in the evening, one thing I've seen grow really tremendously over the last couple of years is with our WOVA app. You've got a lot of people who will post, I'm just going to have a meet and greet by the pool. Do we have any swimmers who want to meet and talk and swim some laps together? Or there's this great gym down the street that does CrossFit. Any CrossFit people want to wake up and go in the morning. So it's not all tailored around the industry, but it's building those connections based on your outside hobbies as well. Those connections that can really last a lifetime.
Absolutely. Or you can find the host of Rebel HR in the bar singing a karaoke song somewhere too. That's we'll put that in the hova. Hova. I'm never gonna get it. I don't know. I don't get the scoreboard stuff, but like, yeah, it's cool. It's fun.
Well, hey, I'm going for that karaoke.
But like, there's no karaoke going on. It just happens. Like, it's just me singing as loud as I can. So just, this is not an organized event. No, all kidding aside. So we are honored to be a sponsor for the conference. Rebel HR will be there. We're going to be doing a live podcast. We're going to be having some awesome guests coming on. We're going to be interviewing all sorts of cool people, grabbing some of these speakers from all around the world that are going to be sharing their expertise as well. So it's a ton of fun. We had the chance to do it last year. We are absolutely doing it again. So if you're at the conference, swing on by. Maybe we'll get you on the air too, or not. Last year, I had a bunch of people that like walked by and they were like running the other way. Cause like, oh God, no, don't put me on this podcast. I don't want you to.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. They were a little hesitant, but this year we're gonna pull them in. We're bringing them in. We're gonna
yeah.
If Sam and Millie, if we can have a few drink tickets to encourage them to come on over, we'll do that.
Yeah, we're gonna start a series. We're gonna call it Sloshed HR, and it'll be what's brewing in HR. It'll be like, well, this will just be what happens after all of the brewing has been drank.
History. This is like drunk.
Perfect. That's perfect. We're gonna do like a fireside chat. We're gonna pull HR professionals in. We're just gonna get them completely intoxicated on whatever substance they'd like, and just have them tell the most ridiculous stories that's ever happened to them in the workplace. I think that's a podcast we would all listen to.
I say when I retire, I'm going to write a book. I'll redact all these by
every other HR professional. The other day I was out in the community and I ran into one of my former coworkers and we were at a concert and it was just great to catch up. And she was like, "Do you remember that time when that happened?" And it was this crazy story, and I won't go into details, but let's just say there were more violations of a code of conduct than you could ever kind of imagine. And I honestly looked at her and I said, "No, I totally forgot about that." It was like 6 years ago. I don't remember that. I don't know. Too many other crazy things have happened since then. So, call to action, write it down. Because you're going to get to a point in your career where you forget more than you remember until somebody reminds you about it.
That reminds me. So just this week, every week in HR, something happens. It's never boring. We had, some changes and that we were attending to. And I had an intern who, they're starting their career. He not in the HR department. He came up to me and he's like, "Hey, do you know what happened with so-and-so?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm in HR. I know what happened to so-and-so." I was like, "But I'm not going to tell you." But it's just funny because I think that, we in the HR community sometimes forget we know so much that others don't. And it can be taxing, but it's also hilarious. And it's why we need to network.
I totally agree. And that's actually where I'm going with this. Like, so one of the things that's really interesting to me, and I think really powerful, is that at these types of events or, general like networking events where you take HR professionals away from their workplace and put them in contact and connect them with other HR professionals that are dealing with very similar things, interesting things start to happen, right? Number one, there's a shared common understanding of what it's like to exist in that space, right? And as much as as much as I think a lot of people assume that they know what it's like to do HR, a lot of people think they know how to do HR. The reality is, like, unless you do it and live it and breathe it, 40 plus hours a week, you really don't have an understanding of what it's like. So there's that common understanding. But what also happens is there's a connectivity and the shared energy that you can see at like every HR conference I've ever been to, where people start to make these connections and realize that we're not alone in this, right? That we're all doing our best, and we're all working towards kind of this shared common goal. And we all do that differently depending on our roles and the organizations we work in. But having that network and having that shared experience is so incredibly important. And I will tell you and all the listeners out there that some of the most important connections and mentors and things that I would attribute a lot of my career success to have been a direct result of getting connected with people at conferences like this, and putting down the cell phone and not responding to emails, and actually just being open to the experience of connecting with other folks that are going through similar stuff. And good things happen when you open yourself up to that. So, for those of you that are thinking about going to the conference or headed to any other type of HR conference, my biggest piece of advice, which actually came from the great Steve Brown, is we're all people. Put down your phones and be with other people.
Yeah, it's about, your employer is allowing you to go there. They're paying the money. Be present, right? Be present in the moment and allow yourself to step out of the work box for just a day or two.
Well, and Kyle, I don't know if you remember this, but you talked about some of the biggest learnings that you ever have had, you've learned from people at these conferences. And it was a few years ago back. It was back in Coralville, and we were at the hotel bar. And you and I were having a conversation with Paige, and I was I feel like in HR, it's like cat years, or what are they, dog years? Like you've been in 1 year. It's actually you've been in 7 years.
Yeah, that was only like 2 years ago. Holy shit.
It's like, oh, wow. So naive.
I remember Samantha that night.
Yeah, I was naive. It was so cute.
She was perfectly fine, Patrick. Don't paint her out to be something she wasn't.
That was a fun night.
Yeah. So one of the things you had told me is, because I do love HR law and compliance, I think it's super interesting. My real calling was probably a lawyer, but I can't go back to school because that sounds like a lot of work that I just don't want to do. A lot of debt I don't want. But I was telling you, like, oh, I love the laws. It's so interesting. And you were like, you can't lead with the law all the time. And I was like, well, I know. But I was like, I, at the time, thought I was some hot shot, and I was like, but the laws are so important. And then now, just 3 years later, it's like, it's good to know the laws, but I think it's even better to know the risk. Like, there's all these cute laws out there, but what's really the risk if you break the law? Not advocating for you to break the law, just it's all about you should know it, but you can't lead with an iron fist.
Find that gray line, that gray box you can live in.
Yeah, gray is all that we live in.
Gray is the new black and white.
I remember that conversation, Samantha, and you got me going because and I remember the statement, and I've made this statement many times, and I, as I do some speaking and so on, I talk about it. But my argument is, if you do anything with the explicit rationale that you don't want to get sued, as opposed to just trying to do the right thing, you're doing it wrong. You're operating in the wrong context. You're operating from a fear-based scarcity mindset. You're not actually operating with best intentions. It is important to understand it. It's important to understand the risk and quantify the risk. That's obviously an extremely critical and value-added role that we all play. But that doesn't mean the tail wags the dog. The law doesn't necessarily dictate how we think about helping people and solving problems. And in general, my take, now you got me going again. In general, my take on compliance is, compliance for employment law. It's really the entire, it doesn't matter where in the world you are. The entire point of the law is to protect employees from being abused. So as long as you're operating in the paradigm that you're not going to abuse employees or mistreat people, in general, you're usually going to be pretty safe. Now, you also need to know when to, ask an attorney for advice. But
Yeah. If
that's
you
that.
treat people
That was
well,
the
that's
gist of the
just the best.
conversation.
Yeah. If you treat people well, that's what's gonna get you there.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean,
That's
I may have
why
been in rare form that
you
night too.
should come to come to conferences so Kyle can change your thinking.
Yeah, if you get me in the right mindset, I'll give you all the free advice.
All the free advice. Change my thinking. I thought I knew so much back then.
I think so. I want to touch on this for a second. So, and Samantha, I sincerely appreciate you sharing that with me. I also want to maybe put this call out there for HR professionals that are going to conferences or interacting with other professionals out there. Share your knowledge. I think one of the things that I've observed out there is sometimes we get really kind of closed off, right? And we get, and for good reason, we don't want to share confidential information or disparage a person or a company, so we're mindful. But the reality is that if you're open and you share these experiences and perspectives and let down those walls a little bit with other HR professionals, can really be a powerful and helpful thing for somebody that needs to hear it. So I appreciate you sharing that, Samantha. I will say there have been so many other people that have shared knowledge and changed my mindset throughout the years that has been really powerful.
I like that train of thought. I know that this year I've stepped out of the box even more than just SHRM, and I've started mentoring. Well, through SHRM, I've started mentoring someone. Never done that before, but it was one of those concepts that I've always sat there and said, well, I could write a book on this topic, or I've been through that so many times. Let's just write a book about that. Why write a book on it when you can just share your experiences and then have that person you've connected with be available to call you when they have questions or quickly send you an email, and they don't have that fear factor. No longer having to go through Google or ChatGPT or anything like that to figure out what the answers are when they've got a connection who's done it.
Right.
Well, and I think, actually that seeking to understand, that's really what SHRM is focusing on with those civil conversations. And so, you can have those civil conversations over whatever's brewing in your cup. But I think it's a good tie to why you've got to get out there and meet people.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
We've got such a wide range of new and seasoned individuals volunteering for the conference this year. I had to laugh at our first on-site meeting because I learned about one of them that they absolutely love FMLA law. So if I ever have questions about FMLA, I can go directly to her now.
That's what we would call a unicorn.
Right?
Yeah.
Do you have their name? Does anybody need an FMLA administrator? Because I've never met that person.
Love that. That's disgusting. But that's fine.
I won't drop the name out here. I'll just encourage everyone to go around and talk to all the conference volunteers as part of your networking assignment and figure out which one it is.
There you go. We've got like a scavenger hunt now. It's like we're gonna go on a wild goose chase. I did cut my teeth. I did that. I felt like I did that for like 2 years straight, where I had so many FMLA claims. I felt like I was just an FMLA administrator for the organization. But, that's a good way to learn it.
Yeah.
I just stay as far away as possible.
That's my feeling about work comp. I did that for 5 years, and it can stay in the back corner from now on.
I feel you. I feel you. All right. Well, now that we started to talk about workers' compensation and FMLA, I feel like we're going to start to lose listeners. So we're going to shift gears. We're going to go into the Rebel HR Flash Round. Are you ready?
Not at all.
Not at all. Perfect. That's exactly where we want you. All right. Question number 1. Where do we need to rebel?
I would say we need to rebel the status quo. You get comfortable in your mindset. You get comfortable with the decisions you make. You want to play the safe route all the time. And that's not where we need to be. We need to be willing to go out of the box, let your spidey senses tingle a little bit, and think of all those crazy spider web ideas. Don't be afraid.
I want to answer this one as well. Similar to what actually we had talked about a whole year ago when I was kind of sitting in the same chair, is we need to disrupt against not holding people accountable. That's something I feel like you can do it very civilly, and you should do it very civilly. But when something's wrong, why are we just not going to people? We could cut so much drama and work if we were just direct communicators. So I think we need to move forward with being direct communicators and holding people accountable.
Question number 2. Who should we be listening to?
Well, I love Cy Wakeman. Her whole platform is on reality-based leadership. And that's what we're in. You know, there's lots of great leadership theories we all probably learned about to take our SHRM test, our certification test. But let's be honest, what's actually happening. And she is all about the direct communication. And that's what adults in the workplace need. We don't need to baby them. And she's all about that.
Some great research there. I totally agree. The reality-based leadership was pretty formative a number of years ago. I read it. And then No Ego is another really good book by Cy that's well worth the read. I joke, half of my job is ego management. You know, it's really it's
Only half?
like that's really what I do on a regular basis.
She has a great newsletter. So I don't know if it goes out once or twice a week, but she usually has videos in there, and I like the newsletter in addition to her published books as well.
Yeah. All right, last question. So we've been talking about the conference. How can people get connected with you two and sign up for the conference?
So getting connected with people at the conference, the best way to do that is you're going to go to iowashrm.org. That's our new redesigned website for our whole Iowa State SHRM Council. So you should go and check it out. And then I definitely encourage people to connect with me. Love the networking piece of HR. And I'm Samantha Coulson on LinkedIn. And I'm sure you can link my LinkedIn in the show notes.
I would agree with that. LinkedIn is the best way to get a hold of me. I'd love to have more connections and be able to share any of my experience as well as learn from each of you. You can also email any questions you have specifically about the conference to admin@iashrm.org.
Perfect. We will have that in the show notes. Pop open your podcast players, click on in. Really appreciate you both spending the time here with us today. And most importantly, appreciate you spending your time helping organize this conference. Really excited to be there this year. Check us out in the Expo Hall, and we'll be seeing you soon.
Sounds good. We'll network on how the law's not everything when we get there.
Sounds good. All right, that does it for the Rebel HR podcast. Big thank you to our guests. Follow us on Facebook at Rebel HR Podcast, Twitter at Rebel HR Guy, or see our website at rebelhumanresources.com. The views and opinions expressed by Rebel HR Podcast are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of any of the organizations that we represent. No animals were harmed during the filming of this podcast.
Baby.